Good evening and welcome to ReachLawyer's Friday Talk Show. Today's episode on A Journey in a Judgment. It is a part 4 in the series of Desiccating Democracy. But before we begin today's discussion, I'd like to take a moment to introduce ReachLawyer to you. We are a network of lawyers concerned about the rule of law, constitutional morality, and the future of this country. Simply put, ReachLawyer is a legal training and support initiative for civil rights movements, social activists, and individuals to empower them with legal knowledge. While the core of our activity revolves around our work with legal fraternity, we also undertake various other initiatives to further legal awareness, social legal advocacy, and more significantly, to collaborate with various human rights groups and grassroots organizations. You can look us up at www.reachlawyer.org to know more about us. I'd like to hand over the discussion to our moderator, Mr. Saurabh Ashok.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to today's discussion on what we've called a journey to a judgment. Today's discussion is going to be slightly different from what we've done till now. Our previous discussions have dealt with various laws, the myriad ways in which they affect human rights in this country, and the people who more often than not tend to be left out by some of the more important provisions. But today's discussion is going to be, from our perspective at least, as less law-oriented as possible, because today's discussion is going to be about a movement that culminated in one of the most significant cases in India's environmental jurisprudence. And that case is the case of Samata versus the state of Andhra Pradesh in 1997. The case is interesting for many reasons, but perhaps most significantly for promoting an idea of development that was inclusive. And that's possibly the biggest takeaway from a case like Samata, because what the Supreme Court in that case was able to do was understand that development, as we like to see today, cannot be confined to only the people that it intends to serve within a very limited framework. Development has to help people at the margins, because otherwise that's all they are in the context of India's storied rise of development, just people at the margins. Today's discussion is going to focus, however, not so much on the celebrated piece of sort of jurisprudence, but on the communities, the people, and the organizations involved in a decade-long movement that finally culminated in a judgment that promoted the rights of tribal communities across India. So before we move on to our discussion with Mr. Ravi Pragada, the person who founded Samata, that was the organization at the helm of this movement, and the Alliance of Mines, Minerals, and People, we're going to just briefly go over why the case of Samata was so important. We're also joined today by Mr. B.T. Venkatesh, of course, ReachLawyer's founder, and someone in his own capacity who's been affiliated with Mines, Minerals, and People, an alliance of people, organizations involved in the fight against state-backed mining interests. So why was the case of Samata important? Because this case was extremely significant at the juncture at which it arrived, because the court here was tasked with a very significant legal question. And the question was a question we've seen raised in many other states that are resource rich. Can mining leases be granted to non-tribal persons in light of the state regulations that were available at that point in time? In our case, we were dealing with the Andhra Pradesh Scheduled Areas Land Transfer Regulation. And also, can mining leases be granted in the context of the guarantees of the fifth schedule of the Constitution? The court also delved into other important aspects of the law. It delved into the relevant provisions of the Andhra Pradesh Panchayati Raj Extension to Scheduled Areas Act to address another important question that we've also seen, in later judgments over the years, whether the powers vested in Gram Sabhas give them a certain degree of autonomy in regards to questions of self-governance and preservation of community resources. This is a question we've seen come up in future judgments as well. Post the Samata judgment, we saw this in the Vedanta judgment as well, where the entire case seemed to finally hinge on this question of autonomy, on this question of self-governance, on this question of communities' control over the resources. And one might even venture to say that almost all environmental questions ultimately boil down to this simple idea that if you vest control over resources in the communities, the entire state is better off. Not in some national government that's going to promote all of our welfare, but in the communities that live in these regions and have an intricate relationship with these lands and their resources that go much further than some monetary stake in that sense. So specifically with regard to the Samata judgment, we've seen that the court upheld the scheme of the 1959 regulation and the fifth schedule of the Constitution by declaring that all land transfers from tribals to non-tribals are null and void. And perhaps the most significant of this aspect of this judgment is its retrospective application, because it wasn't just saying that land transfers from tribals to non-tribals would be void. It was also saying that all previous land transfers from tribals to non-tribals would be void. And that marked a genuine milestone in the way we viewed ownership of community resources. The court, to arrive at such a conclusion, undertook an expansive interpretation of Section 3(1)(a) of the 1959 regulation and interpreted person to include both natural and juristic persons, thereby bringing the state government within the fold of that definition. And why was this important? Because this ensured that the state government, not just tribal persons, but even the state government as a juristic person, was precluded from transferring lands in these scheduled areas to non-tribal persons, body corporates, companies, what have you. And India's story of development has largely been that, right? Complicity of multiple governments in backing mining interests. We always see that there is a state mining development corporation at the center of granting these expansive and unregulated mining leases to companies for their own profits, right? But irrespective of its emancipatory promise, I just also think it's important to address that there were shortcomings to this judgment. And specifically in the case of Samata, we've seen these shortcomings have very serious consequences. So what were these shortcomings? Perhaps the biggest drawback of the Samata judgment was the way in which it carved out a further exception to the law at the time. The law at the time only said that land transfers between tribals or between tribals and tribal cooperative societies would be permissible under the Act. But the court went one step further. It ended up saying that even land transfers to state instrumentalities like the Andhra Pradesh Mining Development Corporation would also be permissible under the Act. Many environmental activists since have questioned this sort of unnecessary reading of the Act, because in subsequent years, we've seen how the State Mining Development Corporation, specifically in Andhra Pradesh, has gone about using this exception to its advantage. We've seen how state governments and the State Mining Development Corporation have actually colluded with mining companies to ensure that the sum and substance of the judgment was just done away with. And that's perhaps one of the biggest disadvantages of the Samata judgment. But with that, I think I'd like to conclude my introduction and open the discussion to Mr. P.T. Venkatesh and Mr. Ravi Devapragada. Thank you both for being here today. And I, as much as anyone else, I'm looking forward to what Ravi sir has to say about his own experiences with the movement that has been that went on for more than a decade, even before the judgment, and perhaps more importantly, the lessons we can learn from this movement. But before we move on to today's discussion, I have a short clip I'd like to play. This clip is from a documentary called Mahua Memoirs, and it deals with the struggles the community faced in the scheduled areas. More often than not, we see people speaking on behalf of communities when they perhaps shouldn't. So I'm just going to let this clip do the talking for itself.
Deep in the mountains of the eastern Ghats is the Araku Valley. The Burra caves are famous for their natural calcite formations of stalactites and stalagmites. The Araku Valley is also home to many Adivasis, like the Kondadura, who found these caves. We heard from them the story of this discovery. When one of their pregnant cows failed to return home by nightfall, the worried elders searched the hills. One of them suddenly disappeared through a bush and found himself dangling at the mouth of a cave. Through a shaft of sunlight that cut through the darkness, he saw an amazing sight. Their missing cow, standing peacefully inside the cave, gently nursing its newborn calf. The Kondadurais, who practice a form of shifting cultivation called Podu on the mountain slopes and valleys, are completely self-sufficient. Only when necessary they visit the weekly market, where they trade their produce in exchange for essentials that they cannot grow, like salt and clothes. This region has high deposits of lime, bauxite and coal, apart from gemstones, mica and other minerals. And where mineral deposits are, can the prospectors be far behind?
చిన్న ఎలక పిల్లలాగా అయి దూరుకున్నాడు ముందు ఇలా చేసి మరి మా భూమికి లీజ్ చేస్తాడని తెలియదు వీడికి అది తెలియకపోయి అందరు బుట్టలు మొత్తం లొకేషన్ అది మొత్తం తీసి మా పెద్దలు సంతకాలు ఎనిమిదలు తీసుకెళ్తే మళ్ళీ అటు నుండి తిరిగి ఇప్పుడు కొత్త వలస లక్ష్మీనారాయణ అతనికి లీజీ జంచింది లిమ్మలపాడు గ్రూపు ఆ మైకా ఎక్కడ ఉండిన మైకా కూడా అతంది పెద్ద దూరాలని ఇలా గోంగితే రక్తం తేలినట్టు కల్పిస్తుంది ఆ రోడ్లు ఆ వచ్చి బేగులు ఈ వెనక పక్కన బేగులు పెద్ద పెద్ద బేగులు పట్టేసి చిన్న చిన్న సుత్తెలు గను సుత్తెలు పట్టుకొని తిరుగుతుండేవాడు అది ఒలుకులు కాదు అన్నట్టు విన్నాం పెద్ద ఘాటీలు కూడా ఎక్కుతుంటారు అంపవెల్లి సూపర్వైజర్కి పిలిచి తెచ్చాడు ఆడ ఒక మిషన్ పట్టుకొని వచ్చాడు ఆడ మిషన్ కత్తిస్తే అది పెద్ద కుక్క కీరినట్టు అలా కీరితే ఆండ మనసులు పిల్ల బొట్టలు బోతలు నట్టు ఏటి తెచ్చినారు కానీ మనకు మొత్తం మింగిస్తుంది చంపేస్తుందని పారిపోవడం అది అంతా పటపటలు చేస్తున్నారు బాబు డ్రిల్లింగ్ మిషన్ తెచ్చి మరి మాకు పొలాలు కూడా నీళ్ళు ఇవ్వకుండా ఆ డ్రిల్లింగ్ మిషన్లకి తెస్తున్నారు నీరు ఇదేట్రా మన భూమికి పోతున్నది కదా పై ఆండ్లకు తెచ్చి ఇంకా ఏరే ఆండ్లకు తెచ్చి మా పని చేయిస్తున్నాడు మన పోయినారు భూములు మన భూములు పోతున్నాయి చేసి పోరాటం పెడితే మళ్ళీ ఒక సార్ వస్తుంది మీకు తగులుకొన్నాం కత్తులు గొడ్డలు పట్టి ఒకసారి తగులుకొనితే కట్టి తీసిపోవడం సబ్ కలెక్టరు పిఓ గారు మరి పోలీసులు కానిస్టేబుల్ ఎస్ఐ గారు అందరు వచ్చేస్తారట బొంబాయి నుండి పోలీసులు వస్తారట బొంబాయి పోలీసులు వచ్చేస్తారు వారికి మొత్తం 2 ఊర్లకు మొత్తం తీసిపోవడం అన్నారు.
Since the 40s, the place has seen steady incursions by mining companies. The mining reached threatening proportions when blasting on top of the Burra caves started damaging the natural formations below. It was then that the Adivasis began to protest. But the protests remained sporadic. It gathered momentum in the late 80s when Birla Pericles was granted a lease to mine in Nimmalapadu for silica-free calcite. The government assisted Birla Pericles to lay this road from Damaku to Nimmalapadu to transport mined calcite. The local villagers resisted.
మాకు ఇక రోడ్డు గురించి మా పార్టీకి మరి రోడ్డు इजरिका की तरह होता है इजरिका की होती माप सबको लट लटवा तियल एताप मैं इजरी रोड ने मैं कावले हप यह का मैं इजरी रोड ने की तरह మరి మై భూమి ది ₹1,00,000 సితింబా మై భూమి ది డబ్బు మన ఎతాత్ మన ఇతి మా పాయక మాపు మరి యా బిర్లా వరవాతరే మై చెడ్డ ఇబంది की तरह का మా కుటుంబం జీ బెస్న జన జకుల తరే సహార్ का మరి మై రోడ్ వద్దు మై భూమిని కావాలి హపే ఆయా బిర్జి రోడ్డు बिरजी दिका मैं खाना कट तो हिसाबे आता का मादी इता का मादी किताबे मापी बात कीजिए ना
బిర్లా కంపెనీ మాకు మొత్తం ఆర్డర్ వచ్చింది కంపెనీ వాడికి ఎవడు అడ్డలేడు మనం అంత సాలేము బిర్లా ఇది పెద్ద కంపెనీ అంటున్నారు పెద్ద కంపెనీ వాడికి తొలగించడం మన వల్ల కాదు మనం చూస్తే మన చేతిలో గన్ను లేదు మన చేతిలో డబ్బులు లేవు కోర్టుకు పెడదామంటే మనకి డబ్బు లేదు
But fight they did. All they had was the determination to stand their ground and the support of an organization called Samata.
With that, I think I'd now like to ask Venkatesh sir to just start off today's discussion.
Very good evening and welcome to ReachLawyer Friday Talk Show. It's a joy that today we have Mr. Ravi Reba Pragada. Ravi Reba Pragada, the name resonates. The protest against the authorities concerned for protection of the rights of the tribals. Not just in Araku, not just in Paderu in Andhra Pradesh, but in every nook and corner. Maybe it is Jadupuda or Khasi Hills of Meghalaya, or Jharkhand or Odisha. Are you talking in terms of the marble mining in Rajasthan, or the rights of the tribals in Gir Forest, or even the rights of tribals in Wayanad? Any and every part of India, you have Ravi Reba Pragada there to protest, to assist, to protect the rights of the tribals. He and his Samata is a journey which has gone for nearly around 3.5 decades in the Eastern Ghats and now spread across the country. Today, the struggle as against Tatas in Odisha or against Vedanta in Lanjikar, or whether it is Dhamra Port, or whether it is the Tatas in Chhattisgarh, you name the mining activity, or Adanis at this point of time, you name the struggle of Adivasi in India, it's associated with the name of Ravi Reba Pragada and his organization, Mines, Minerals and People. He has built and founded one of the largest alliances of communities which are affected by mining. The kind of mining which we look into in Mines, Minerals and People, which we have seen, is the mining which is happening in a particular area, people affected by mining which is happening, abandoned mines, and even including greenfield areas. The struggles which happen in all these places, the kind of fear of the state which is put into the hearts of the tribals, the kind of pressure that is put by the state administration, the kind of intimidation that is used by the police, the kind of legal pressure and absolutely want of resources to even fight every aspect of the struggle. Mines, Minerals and People coordinates, supports, assists. And it has been a story of struggle for It's nearly around more than 2 decades of its existence. Great credit goes to Mr. Ravi Pragada and his team of activists. Today we have large number of amazing activists across India, and I have to have a list of names which go into around something 40 names as of now, who are the leaders, right from Chhattisgarh to Uttarakhand to Rajasthan to Jharkhand to Odisha to Tamil Nadu, almost every part of the country. The organization has its footprint, and organization stands for the rights of the tribals in this country. And that is something which is an extraordinary achievement of Mr. Ravi Pragada. His focused activity in respect of protection of rights in more particularly fifth schedule areas of the constitution, I think on this he would also shed little light on it, has been extraordinary. Today, the story is so huge. Today, we are talking in terms of a journey. We are talking in terms of a journey of Mr. Ravi Pragada. From being a student who just came to Hills to to prepare his dissertation, to getting involved into the struggle lives of the people and supporting them, and the kind of trauma, the travails, the difficulties, the challenges that he faced in last 3.5 decades of his activity with the communities, the tribal community in Eastern Ghats, particularly as against Birla Pericles is concerned, his struggle and his success and his achievement. Today, the landmark judgment which Saurabh was referring to, Samata versus State of Andhra Pradesh. Any student who talks in terms of environment, any student who talks in terms of tribal rights, invariably has to read the judgment of Samata versus State of Andhra Pradesh. Samata, an organization founded by Ravi Pragada, an organization meant for the protection of rights of the tribals. Today, he has come in schools. He has educated tribals. He has secured rights of the land for so many of them, and he has made life for millions of people across the country, and more particularly in this particular entire tribal belt of Eastern Ghats. He is a friend, always there, and it is member of the families of the hundreds and thousands of tribals of Eastern Ghats. I had an opportunity to visit the Eastern Ghats, and it was a joy to see that every household, every corner, every village I visited, there is invariably that he was treated, that he was the elder of the family, an elder of the family whom they go to, whom they seek advice from. It was something, an extraordinary achievement of a person. Very self-effacing, who refuses to talk, who refuses to articulate, except when it comes to the rights of the tribals are concerned, and a person who has built his family, his life, his wife. Bhanumati Kalluri is an activist who works on the rights of the tribal women. His 2 children, one is a photographer and is a sculptor, and the kind of work the family he has been doing, he has virtually built his entire life around this rights of the tribals, and his life is the journey. And in fact, today, what we are talking about is that when we normally come across litigations are concerned, we get to hear that yes, a petition came to be filed in Supreme Court, it reached Supreme Court, arguments were heard, and a wonderful judgment was delivered. But there is one thing which is missing in the entire story. That success has gone through such amount of struggle, such amount of trauma, such amount of pain, such amount of success, every small successes, every aspect of it is an extraordinary journey. Today we have invited Mr. Ravi Pragada to talk about that journey, in that judgment, and the way it took place and how he made it possible. And it's this journey which is a valuable lesson for many of us to know, because we just come across from urban spaces, we just say, yeah, there is a judgment of the Supreme Court on this issue. Yeah, there is a judgment of Supreme Court on issue regarding tribal rights. What exactly is this? We hardly get into the aspect of this judgment, the kind of how it impacts the lives of these people. I think today we have Mr. Ravi Pragada with us to explain all these kind of work that he has done, the kind of journey that has been for the case of Samata versus the state of Andhra Pradesh, how It was a story of a David versus Goliath, which is something which all of us know. Any lawyer who has been working on the rights-based litigation, he will know that the importance of Samata versus State of Andhra Pradesh. Today we have Mr. Ravi Pragada in person to explain it to us. What was the journey? How was it like? And what exactly it meant? And what exactly are the challenges still that he faces? Today with us, Ravi Pragada. I request Saurabh to invite Mr. Ravi Pragada. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I think I'd like to call Ravi sir right now to just start telling us about his journey. And I think BD sir did a wonderful job of introducing what that really looked like. So, Ravi sir, I think you could just start us off.
Well, good evening, and thank you, Saurabh and BT and the rest of you, the team at ReachLawyer and Listening Post. And welcome to all others. Yeah, it's indeed a very nice of ReachLawyer to organize this. It's like you said, it's a journey for the last 3.5 decades. So, without further ado, as introductions have been very elaborate and maybe sometimes larger than life, but still. So without further ado, let me start. See, it's very simple actually. A lot of people ask me why I do this, how did I get motivated, and why I continue to do the same after so many years too. It's like this. It's a simple thing that I grew up in the forest. My dad was in the forest department. And of course, when I grew up, I was the son of an officer. So there was always this intrigue of how the tribal people live. And so when I got a chance after my post-graduation in rural development, as my good friend B.T. Venkatesh said, I came to the village to actually do a dissertation. I was studying in Madras Christian College, Tambaram, in Tamil Nadu. I was doing my rural development, and then I had to do a dissertation. And as I'm that way, not from a rural area, I had a problem. I couldn't sit in the library and finish my dissertation. So I came to the village. Now the village, it was like doors of perception in one sense. It just opened my eyes and it's a different world. The dissertation I finished, that's a different issue. But then what opened to me was the life of people and how they're struggling, how the apathy of the system, and how, everybody is struggling and they're not getting their due that way. Even today. Actually, today is worse. 30 years back, maybe it was better. We'll come to that later. So this opened up my world, and then I saw when I walked from village to village in the tribal villages, in the tribal areas. I did a 21-day walk in 54 villages way back in 1987. And there I saw there were three kinds of villages, villages which are near the road or roadside. There are villages in the valley, and there are villages on hilltop. Now the three, though they all belong to the same tribe or the similar subcaste there, but their worldview was totally different. Their approach to life was different. The hilltop people were like really, like what you people, many of you would have kind of seen the cones of Niyamgiri, and or this movie which was shown in the beginning, the Maua Memoirs, where they talked of the Birhors and the Baiga tribes of Madhya Pradesh and Chhattisgarh. So I saw how they transport what they grow, what they collect in the forest to the shandies. Shandies are weekly markets. And even today, this area is so vibrant that there are so many markets. So this, anyway, kind of living with them for the first 3 to 5 years, we stumbled upon, I would say, technically, actually we stumbled upon this big issue called Samata judgment, which became Samata judgment. So we were essentially a team of local youth and me trying to help tribal communities deal with the government system. Like somebody has a problem with the revenue department, forest department, because it was an Naxal area or it was a conflict area where the police and the Maoists, today they're called Maoists, but those days they were called the People's War Group, Naxalites or People's War Group. So there was this conflict and literally every village, the 54 villages that we used to work with or started with, had several cases. All the able-bodied men are actually in the cases, and they go every month to the hearing and come back. And these cases go on. Finally, I mean, these we call dummy cases. In Telugu, they call dummy cases. That is 70 people, 80 people, 100 people in one case. So the police can just pick up anyone they want, things like that. So as these were conflict areas, this was big. So we used to help the people in handling the cases, handling these administrative things. And a lot of villages didn't have schools, they didn't have roads. Health facility, even today, is a big issue. Though, of course, I must say in the COVID time, the tribal areas are doing better than the other areas. But as we went by, doing this work, people used to come from different villages, approach us, and then we send our team, and that's how we used to take up. And in one such thing, came up this one young tribal boy saying, we are cultivating our land, but it's a scheduled area. It's called an agency area in Telugu because it was under the control of the agent to the government in the British time. So these are called agency areas. And we are cultivating, but we can't get our title deeds because there are mining companies. So this kind of, our antenna kind of went up and we went there. It was very far from where we were actually living or working. It was 200 kilometers away. This was in 92 December. And the journey from there started, first we got a batch of advocates to come and look at the issue. Then we got another friend of ours, Dr. Sridhar, who's a geologist, to come and see these limestone mines in and around Bora Caves. And so we understood the thing, we understood the law, and then we filed the case based on another judgment of the AP High Court, where it ruled that the leases given to a non-tribal company were null and void. So this case went on technically for 3 years in the High Court. See, here there are 2-3 aspects. One is that I'll just finish the case part and then go into the movement, because it's not like B.T. Venkatesh explained, it's not just an issue of litigating. You have to organize the community, because there are these various, like 21 leaseholders in a particular area. They are also organizing the community, and we have to organize the community. The government is in the middle, and those days. So that's how we found. So when we first filed the case, we got a stay order. So we were all very happy, and we went to see whether the stay was being implemented or not. And then started our journey. The local police station, or the local police, actually caught our people and put them into illegal custody for 7 days in August 1993, saying that they're a part of an Naxalite group called Vantla Mamadi Dalam. And so they've tried to force our people to agree that they are Naxalites of a particular Dalam, but our people stuck on. There were people outside, the tribal communities doing dharna at the police station saying, please release our people. We have gone to the court. They raided our house. My wife was working again in another community in the same area. Luckily, she was not there. I had gone to Hyderabad to file a counter in the case. And when I came to know all this, that's the first time I understood the fourth pillar. That is, we called up the SP. The SP was not ready to listen. He said, you will hear from us shortly. and kept the phone down. So then we went to the media and said, see, our people, I mean, we have gone to the court, we have an order, and this is the stay order, but our people have been put into illegal custody. So it was Indian Express. There's a good friend, Prabhakar Sharma Garu in Vizag, who was a senior journalist. And he put this article out saying Samata activists in illegal custody. Now this got our people out without any cases, and the police were quite embarrassed for doing this, because I said I would go to the court for a contempt case, because I've gone to the High Court. I'm not an Naxalite. I have an address. I have I've approached the law. And so if anything that the police would have or any doubts on us, we should be summoned in a proper way as per law, and we would come and reply or answer their questions. So we then conducted a huge rally, and there came few other villages saying there are leases in our places also. So we filed a second case in the High Court. We didn't get a stay, but in that second case came the Birla Percolates Limited, which is part of the Aditya Birla Group. They had a plan of making seawater magnesium briquettes somewhere near the sea, near Vishakhapatnam. And they wanted this silicon-free calcite, which is available in Nimalapadu, in Anantagiri Mandal of Vizag district. So it became a big case. We lost in the High Court after 3 years, and we had to rush to the Supreme Court. And in 2 years, so in the Supreme Court, what we did was we also took up what they call the Dusty service. That is, we had 33 respondents, and we had to serve our affidavit, 3 copies of our 200-page affidavit, 3 copies each on the 33 respondents. Unless this is served, the proceedings would not go forward. So we took up the Dusty service, we served it on all the people, and then the court took it up, and within 2 years, we got this Samata judgment. But yeah, let's keep the judgment aside, we'll come to it. But organizing these various villages, scattered tribal communities, with the Birlas on one side, the other small contractors on the other side, and complication, there is Bora Caves, which is a limestone caves. There is reserve forest. There's a railway line that goes from Vizag to Bailadela. So we started understanding how we could organize the community. Now, this was a painstaking process while fighting the issues with the police. And later, towards the end of we winning by 97, within 5 years, we won the case. Later, by 97, we also got a lot of pressure from the People's War Group, saying that, you're making the law work, but we are saying that the Constitution doesn't work. So you get out from here. Now, this became another issue later, which went on for a long time. So in the meanwhile, the Birlas had the issue was of their mine and a road leading to the mine, 22 kilometers, 90 feet wide road to the mine site from the main Ghat road. Now, this 22 kilometers was a real battlefield, because the Birlas, or the state government at that time, hired the Border Roads Organization, which is part of the military, which is part of the army. It's called, they build these roads in the borders, like China border and Pakistan border, up in the Himalayas. And so they were a whole battalion. I don't know how many people there were. Like, there was a big camp, and there were 3 sub-camps on the 22-kilometer road. They had all the equipment, and they were part of the army. And our tribal communities are rather meek that way. So it was an uphill task. We were just 4 people, but we mobilized. And within these, it was interesting to see there are 14 villages on the road leading to the mine. And there were only 4 villages in our favor, and 10 villages were in the favor of the Birlas. So ultimately what happened was that the road was made, but it was made wherever our movement was strong, the road was small, and wherever the 10 villages which were part of the Birlas or they were in favor of the Birlas or the state government, there the road was wide. In our 4 villages, the road is small. Even today, this is the road built in 97, 99. You can still see it's like that. It's wide in the beginning, then narrow, then wide, then narrow, and wide and narrow, finally. So it proves that wherever we can fight, wherever we are strong, wherever we are organized, our rights can be achieved is one thing that we learned. And mind you, it was a very strategic thing. There's only, I'm talking of 2 cases that we filed in the High Court that went to the Supreme Court, and finally we won. But technically, we also challenged the land acquisition for the road. We knew we cannot challenge it for too long, but as a part of a strategy, it's called spanner in the wheel, because the Border Roads Organization felt, I mean, it could have finished the road in 6 months and left because they were really equipped. They were very professional. They built a very good road that way. So we had to stall them. So we filed the case there. Then the Birlas kidnapped some of our leaders. So we had to get them out. So there was a lot of intrigue. There was a lot of, suspense, happening in those 5 years. Then there was a very interesting thing. So we used to get the tribal communities from there, the leaders, to Visakhapatnam or Hyderabad and organize press meets, because that is the only way we could get our issues out. So in one such incident, it so happened that one of the leaders, while going in the train to Hyderabad to the High Court, he got down in one of the stations and he got lost. So it took us some 3-4 months to actually find him. But we found him and we got him back. But when we are actually doing such movements, any such thing is a difficulty, because the Birlas, the government, the police, everybody would be saying, they sold off your father. They took him to Hyderabad and he's lost now. You can't try kind of find him. So there was opposition from the villages also on us. So you got to manage that too, once again. Then there's another interesting thing about how, when we filed the case in the on the land acquisition, the Roads and Buildings Department had submitted a map to the court, and the map was 45 feet. But when the district collector came for a meeting with the communities and all of us and the Birlas, they showed us a 90 feet wide map. So we were again on the powerful side, or on the right side, because we said, if you show us the right, so we showed them the map that they submitted to the court. So the collector then ordered there should be a resurvey of the entire 22 kilometers and reduce the width from 90 to 45. So we reduced technically the width from 90 to 45. And within this 45, like I said, where we fought, the road is 25, and where the 10 villages is 45. So we could help cutting down of a lot of trees and loss of land. Then, as we were winning the case, by 97 July, we knew we were winning the case. The Birlas wanted to finish the road. So they came forward for negotiation with the community, saying we would give you compensation for the land lost. So in that we went into 3 kinds of rights. One was wetland, second was dry land, and third was a new right which we said it's called enjoyment right. The land could belong to anybody, but I am an occupation of it. And so if you want to send me out, then you got to pay me. So we did this as a withdrawal memo in the High Court, involving the local sub-collector and everything official. And in those days, it was a account payee DD in 97, and all the compensation was paid on record and without any cash transfer, etc. So these are some of the learnings. You see, we learned as we went by. And finally, in 97, when the Supreme Court, now let me shift this thing to Supreme Court. As initially it was a 2-judge bench, and after that it was a 3-judge bench. And when the 3-judge bench came up, the arguments were so, it was so powerful, so great. Actually, I should tell you that there are a few friends there also who helped us. There was, when we went to the Supreme Court in 95, we had a 3-month limit. A special leave petition has to be filed before the 3 months limit. So we ran from this village to Delhi, and Delhi was a big city. We had to find a lawyer. We had no money. A lawyer has to be pro bono, and it's an important case to lose it without being properly defended. So there was this very, very nice officer who's retired now, Dr. E.A. Sharma. So after a week or 10 days, when I couldn't really find anything, I landed up at his place saying, I need help. So he took me to a very good lawyer, Rokshana Swami, who was pro bono, who took up the whole issue, helped us do the affidavit, file the case, etc. And then she could get Soli Sorabji to admit the case. He just came and said, this is a deserving case. And so the case was admitted. And we also got what in the Supreme Court is called a status quo order. Status quo as on November 6th of 1995 or something like that. So we got that, and then the argument started. The court was not really listening to our Rokshana Swami. So at that time, we needed a senior advocate to enter. And again, we had another good friend, Mr. K. Ashok Rao, who was the president of the Public Sector Officers Union, who stays in Delhi, who came forward and connected us with Dr. Rajiv Dhawan. Now, Rajiv Dhawan came. It was very classic. He came and he started talking about Delhi's traffic. And I was thinking, where are we? What is he talking? Then slowly, within an hour and a half, he got it down to the rule of law. And then to the present case, saying that whether the state government has the right to lease lands in scheduled areas to other than tribal people. And then this went on for 3 days. I was there for the full bench, for the 2-judge bench discussion for 4 days, after which it went to the full bench. And Dr. Rajiv Dhawan, when he first came, he just said, don't worry, you relax, we have won the case. Even on the first day itself, he said, it's very strong, you can relax, we will win. And when these arguments were going on, it became such a spectacle in court number 2 in the Supreme Court that everybody used to assemble at this court and listen to these arguments that are going on from morning 10 to evening 4 with just the lunch break. So that way, we won this landmark judgment. Basically, our intention, we went there because the community asked us for their title deeds, the land they're cultivating. So the court did rule that the land in enclosures belongs to the tribal communities and authorities are hereby directed to issue title deeds. Now that's another story. In 1997, this order came and we could get title deeds for this Bora community people in 2015, October. So 97 to 2015. So after getting the judgment is one, getting it implemented is another. And like Saurabh said, this thing of how APMDC, a state-owned, wholly state-owned corporation, could hold a lease and then do a benami, as they tried in the bauxite leases with Anrock Alumina Limited. But we were there again. So you see, the point is when you catch, it's like just getting the judgment is not enough. So therefore, I will actually end it here saying, and then I'll leave it for the questions and others so that we can elaborate further on this. It's an issue that is still going on. And just the other day, give you the picture, just the other day, we realized that there is this Green National Highway Corridor project going through the same area. And they would like to do away with the Gram Sabhas. They would like to do away with public hearing. They would need black metal and other material for the road building and bridge building. And so the issue is back to square one because Samata judgment is there. And so therefore, the journey is so long that it still goes on. And so today we will kind of concentrate till the point from 92 to 97 till we got the judgment, and what happened after the judgment is another issue. So I guess I would stop here, BT and Saurabh, and leave it for you people to ask me some questions. Well, yeah.
Yes. Go on, Sunny, you were saying something.
Okay. Now, BT asked me whether what are the issues from the state. See, the first thing is, we are talking about tribal people whom the state feels they are actually doing some great favor. So they are not like really. Now that reminds me of a conversation with an old tribal person who actually said one day that he asked me, what is Bofors? So I said, Bofors, this is in 89. I said, Bofors. So anyway, I explained to him. I said, why did you ask? He says, you see, I have a small radio and it tells me a lot of things in the morning, afternoon and evening. That is the Prantiya Vartalu, the news, All India Radio Wala. So he says, from the last 6 months, I can understand Delhi and various things, but then this Bofors word is coming last 6 months. What is it? So that's how the context came. And then when I explained to him that this is some, scam and people are taking money to Switzerland. So he said, the Britishers are better. I said, why? He said, they looted the entire world, but took back the money to their country. Our people are looting us and taking it to Switzerland. And then he continued to say that during the British time, the sub-collector used to sit in Narsipatnam and we could go meet him. It used to take us time to meet him, but when we meet him, our work is to be done. But today, when I go to the same sub-collector's office, they keep me waiting. My work doesn't happen. Even if 10 days I'm there, my work doesn't happen because I'm a tribal. So I said, why do you think this happens? He says, this happens because for the Britisher, we were all Indians. For the officer now, he will see what caste I belong to. Are you a Dalit? Are you a tribal? Are you whatever? So they only help people of their caste. This is an opinion of an old person who actually was a runner post in the British time in 1920s during Alluri Sitaramaraju, one of our revolutionary leaders who got killed in the Eastern Ghats by the British. So he was a runner post during that time. And this is a conversation in 89. Now taking off from there, if I actually see, which is very true, the problems with the state were one, for example, we went to the court but we were taken into illegal custody. Can you understand? Imagine this. We approached the court. There's a problem for the tribal people or the communities. And we didn't take up arms or we didn't protest. We actually went to the court. And the court gave a direction. But after the direction, we were put into the illegal custody. So thanks to some good friends and media and things like that, there is no cases on us. But after that came, then there was an issue where at every stage, wherever we do any rally or dharna or anything, the police, we have to take permission, which is fair enough. Then around 95, I was taken into legal custody and foisted various sections and put in the Araku police station for 4 days and then sent to the Vizag Central Prison for 4 days. Luckily, again, the collector, they were good officers who understood and gave me a bail and got me out as fast as possible. And we got back here. But imagine, and when I went to the jail, for example, those days were prohibition days. And when I went into the jail, I found so many of people that I know from the villages. They're all there on some vague prohibition case. Toddy was not banned, but alcohol was banned. And for the tribal people, they drink toddy, and when the police catch them, they are kept behind in the jail. They're sent to the central prison for nothing, and they languish there for so many months or years, unless somebody really bails them out. So that's another issue. Then came the issue with forest department. What we see, the department is conducive to the company, but it's not conducive to our people. So like this, there is apathy, there is this disdain, there is this attitude that, you know, the tribal people, they don't deserve all this, but then we are helping them. This is an attitude, except for officers, some officers at the higher levels and also at the local level, but that's a minuscule, say about 10% of the officers. 90% of the people who are dealing with the people just look down upon them. Now, this has been one great uphill task. And mind you, today it has actually increased much more than before. Those days, somehow, it was more accessible. The state machinery and government was accessible. But nowadays, it's become very, very different and difficult. So, yeah, sort of.
Thank you, sir. Actually, I had a question, but just you've gone through pretty substantively, you know, how you start working with these communities and the organizations and how it finally ended up in the Supreme Court. But just moving a little before that, what I want to ask you was, uh, when you entered this space, how did Samata start working? How do you win the trust of the local community organizations and the associations in New Araku Valley or near any of the many villages, not just near Araku, but even across Visakhapatnam or your East Godavari districts? How did you? Because you spoke about mobilization, which is a very interesting part of your 10 years movement from 1987 to 97. But how did this mobilization come about? How did you, through your work with Samata, enter the space?
See, yeah, that's a good question. Basically, one is that I had some good professors or good teachers, I guess. That's one. So they gave me exposure to Paulo Freire's pedagogy of the oppressed, and and that and when I went to the village, the other thing is acceptance. You see, basically, you can get into any community when you first accept them, and so then they accept you. But if you go there saying I'm educated, I know, I will tell you, then you're totally on the wrong step. You've actually goofed up everything. The point is, yes, I am with you. Let me live with you. Let me eat with you. Let me drink with you. And that's the way we can get into their heart. Essentially, it's a relationship. Mobilization or any kind of work. I mean, even what you lawyers do is a relationship. So what I did, this somehow came natural to me. Maybe, it's not too difficult for me to get accepted. It takes some time. Yes, there is tension also in some places because, like I said, there are 10 villages which were against us. They were for the Birlas. They wanted the road. There were only 4 who didn't want the road or wanted a smaller road. So initially we said no road, and then we realized we made a mistake. So we changed our stand and said, let's have a smaller road. The road should be defined as per people because it's a public purpose. It's for people. So people should decide how wide it should be. Then we got more participation. So as a movement goes in, we got to be kind of, it's a totally, where we got to be kind of tuned in. You can't just because you're a leader, just because you're educated, because you're whatever, you can't ride and roughshod over the people. So it has to be very sensitive, very organic and strategic. Like the issue, we knew our leaders who petitioned in the road, in the highway, in the high court will be kidnapped. So we prepared them. We said, if they kidnap you, just go happily, eat, drink, whatever, but don't sign anything. Okay, we'll get you out. So you be comfortable, don't have to struggle. And similarly, these two leaders were picked up, and the Birlas actually came to us as though nothing, as though they are just coming casually to call on you, have a chai or something. So then we kind of engaged them. We said, you can't leave from here because our people are with you. So we actually did an exchange. So, and then we went back to the court saying we reiterate our commitment to the affidavit. This incident has happened and somebody might come and give a false affidavit, then you should not accept. So the Birlas couldn't use whatever signatures they obtained from my people by force. Then we filed a SC/ST atrocities case. We didn't press the police for arrest. We just said, if these two officers of the Birlas come to the community and say, we are sorry for doing this kidnap business, it's enough for us. No need to press for a case. Please understand this. So what happens there is that we got them to come and say sorry in front of the community. That is good enough for us instead of being vindictive, going after them. It served our purpose. People also understood that what we mean is justice. We are not vindictive. So that's another thing. In a movement, unfortunately, many of our activists go personal on the district collector, on the officers, or anybody who's on the other side. There's no need to be personal because there's nothing personal there. At least if they have anything personal, we should be strategic and say it's the position that we are against, or it's not you as an individual. Otherwise, in movements, it gets very difficult because this personal enmity will actually put you in a wrong footing. So this is another thing that we had learned while mobilizing. And for mobilizing, yes, we had a good team. We had two or three were very good culturally. We had a trained nurse with us who could just go around, sit with the women and children and find out while the meeting is going on. And those days it was interesting. So we had these musical instruments. See, those days there was no mobile, there was no road transport. So it was walking from village to village. And many times we use a mashal, like to walk because in the darkness. So we land up in a village. The villagers are curious as to who has come. Outsiders have come. These are interior villages. So it takes us about an hour or two, maybe sometimes two, but maybe an hour to kind of say, we are from there and this. So then they agree, they accept. We sing a few songs. They all join in. And then somebody says, oh, by the way, what about your food? We are hungry if you can feed us. So, that's a very organic way that so by the morning, we are friends with them. And we go and see their fields. So where is the road coming from? So how can you do? What is your stand? Would you like to be in the movement or you're out of it? So like that. So that's how we kind of mobilize. And once this connect with the people happens, so we are actually connected. This is the third generation of this community that we are in touch with. So I hope I answered your question.
Yes, sir. Definitely. And the next thing I want to ask you about was, because it's come up through, you've mentioned this multiple times today. You talked about how, very evident case of harassment, instances where, local leaders were picked up and everyone knew what was happening, and the mining lobby, which is Birla at that point in time, pretending like, things hunky dory and all of that. Considering that this went on for so long, even if you just look at just 10 years, it might have gone even longer than that. But even if you just take those 10 years with these sort of regular arrests, detentions, and this constant threat, not just from the police, but even from local company officials, how did you manage to tell people that we can't let go right now? We have to keep fighting, despite the fact that you knew these communities were constantly faced with threats from all over.
Well, see, sometimes it is just, I guess, blind faith in what we believe. It's one. Okay. But by saying that, I don't want others to be blind that way. But in faith, that is, yes, we can achieve, we are on the right track, and using the media, see, nowhere have we, like I said, the reason the case was there on me, they took me into the station and that case went on and I refused to pay anything because it's a false case. And finally they just it was under the Prohibition Act. So therefore they finally, when the prohibition was lifted, all the cases were lifted. So, but you see, one is that there is the strength from the community is one. So there is that connect, and the people are with us. So if you are taken into the station, there are people rallying outside for you. So that is one particular confidence. Second, there are good friends, advocates, and media people who will focus, who will kind of raise the issue. So, and we were on the right track. You see, we had the Land Transfer Regulation Act, we had the Forest Conservation Act, and technically the Forest Department is happy and should be happy with us because we defended Section 2 of the Forest Conservation Act, that once a land is declared as RF, whether there is forest or not, it is RF. Because we had to do that, as in Bora Caves, very interestingly, there are 10 villages and there are 5 enclosures or 5 pockets. The entire, like for example, if you think your iPad or your laptop screen is 1 square, imagine that is the Bora Reserve Forest. And in this, there are 5 pockets of non-reserve forest where these villages are situated. And so technically they are revenue villages, but not settled. So they don't have pattas. That was the issue that came to us. So, but there were mining leases given to 5 companies that were amounting to 1,250 acres. And these 5 enclosures, suppose, consider for a second that these 5 enclosures are free of people, free of the villages, and these could be given to the mining guys. Then they amount to only 426 acres. So my point right from beginning with the Forest Department was that the leases are given in reserve forest without clearance of Forest Department. So one officer who was in the beginning played mischief, but subsequent officers agreed with our contention, and that's how we won the case. So that was one. The 2 is that we need to connect dots. We need to, just to explain to you that this issue, as I said, the Samata judgment we won in 97, but the bauxite issue went on till recently and still will go on in future. But somewhere around 2006, that is 9 years after the Samata judgment, we connected with the larger population in the Eastern Ghats in the plain areas, because we started a campaign called Health of the Hills is Wealth of the Plains. See, the tribal people are up in the hills. So through all this, our movement and something, we won the case. But the bauxite issue was larger. It is not just affecting the tribals. If the bauxite is mined, even if the Orissa bauxite is mined, people in Srikakulam and Vijayanagaram, Nagavali, will be affected. The river people who are living in our state will be affected if they're mining in Orissa. Similarly, in this north coastal Andhra Pradesh, we have 21 rivers. They are not perennial, but there are 21 rivers and there are 21 reservoirs already existing. So we went to all these reservoirs, met the water users associations, came to Visakhapatnam and small towns saying, see, your water is coming from the hills. So please join our fight. So we will join your fight and together we will fight for water. So the fight is to say no to mining, no to bauxite. But we connected with a larger crowd on the issue of water because these bauxite hills save water. They absorb water and release into the streams. And that's how our rivers or springs, that's how the water comes. Like Visakhapatnam gets its water from a reservoir which gets water from the tribal areas by rainfall. So we need to connect this way and get support from different sections of society for the issue that we are fighting.
That's really interesting that you raised that, sir, because I think that's what I wanted to ask from you as well. This idea that when you're fighting a larger issue in this situation about mining leases given to these mining companies and the devastation on the environment, you have to fundamentally link that to issues that people are facing, which is that their source of water, because like you mentioned, bauxite hills retain water. It's like a sponge. The minute you mine bauxite there, the water retention capability is lost, and it affects communities across, not just the hill communities, but communities across as well. But moving on to other aspects, I think this, for me at least, this struck me as very different. With the Samata case, compared to say other cases, similar cases that have dealt with the environment, there was some political support from some quarters, whether it was the local representative across different party lines. In that sense, there was some support for the rights of the communities. And very, at least for me, this struck me as very strange that despite the support that existed at some point, there was still strong opposition from the bureaucracy in these areas, which is not usually the case. Because usually the case we see that you have opposition from your political representation, and you have opposition from the bureaucracy as well. So I one thing I want to ask you was, did support from some political corners help while you were mobilizing, or was it just
See, it's like this. We also went to the assembly, state assembly. We met the speaker, we met the opposition parties. And at that time, interestingly, BJP was in opposition. And the floor leader was no other than C.H. Vidyasagar Rao, the ex-governor of Maharashtra. So he actually did a boycott. They walked out of the assembly on this issue of how leases can be given in scheduled areas because of the fifth schedule. See, the advantage here, the only advantage is the fifth schedule and the protection from the constitution, which no other community in our country has, technically. Yeah, Dalits do have a certain protection, but not as much as the tribal populations or tribal communities. So, but then this protection also leads to a paternalistic attitude. So therefore, the state missionary or the state, that way the state, quote unquote, feels it has to dole out justice, it has to give, it has to provide. Well, the constitution says it has to. But yeah, there's maybe that's another issue for another day of sixth schedule and fifth schedule. But the advantage here is the fifth schedule, the framework, and there was also very good. In AP those days we had Mr. Shankaran. We had under his leadership there were so many good officers who are right now, maybe many of them are retired, but some of them are still secretary here and there at the Government of India. But I guess in the next year or so, everybody will go. There was a good orientation for these officers, and they were open to people. They were even like, you could even go knock on the door at 12 in the night, which is impossible now. I mean, of course, in COVID, it's a different thing. So, but yeah, there is the after 1991 new economic policy, the framework has changed. This is my feeling. In the bureaucracy and what they're being trained or what they're being told at the Lal Bahadur Shastri Academy up there in Mussoorie or in the National Police Academy in Hyderabad. So there is a change in the discourse. So this is one thing. The political support, see, locally nobody actually supported us, but we did one thing. We didn't keep quiet. We started one forum called Forum for Protection of Tribal Resources, something like that translates to. So we got in the old ex-MLAs, sitting MLAs, everybody, and we used to make a monthly meeting. We used to take them to these mining areas, come see, you decide for yourself. This is yours. We are non-tribal. You people are the people who have to decide. It's ultimately the Tribes Advisory Council that has to decide. So we attempted all these so we left no stone unturned that way. So if there is an opposition, like I said, if there's a village that is saying, no, we are against you, we would go and find out, why are you against us? So then they said, you're against the road. Then we understood. We said, yes, okay, let's have a smaller road, no? So that way, there is this approach is also a big aspect in a movement.
So I have just sort of a last question in that sense. This is not so much about the journey, but one aspect of the judgment itself was that while on one hand it stops these transfers from tribals to non-tribals and did that retrospectively, which obviously benefited, like you had mentioned as well, the communities there. It also allowed for transfers to the state corporation that was possible. Initially people said that no, this is fine. At the end of the day, it's still a state corporation. The government has some interest in protecting the rights of these communities, all of that. But finally, what happened, immediately after that, was that they were happily leasing these lands and entering into agreements with, in the case of bauxite, with your refinery plants that were again owned by your Jindals, your Birlas, all these people. Did you feel that was some of the most? What is your take on this?
Yeah. The point here is that we could not argue. We can't say that the state control doesn't apply in a fifth schedule area. So that the eminent domain, we could argue up to the point that the eminent domain is limited. But to tell the state in the code of law that there is no eminent domain, that is one issue. Maybe you as lawyers can tell us better on that. That is one. The second was that, okay, they have tried in AP, they have tried, but they could not, APMDC, okay, we didn't, technically APMDC got the lease and APMDC entered into an MOU with these mining guys. But anyway, we challenged it. It's right now the court has said that as there is no mining, as the leases have been given in 2008 and the environment clearances have been given so long back and there's no mining, so APMDC would have to approach the MOEF again for clearances if they want to mine. And at that stage, the opinion of Samata has to be considered. So there is a caveat that way. But you're right. Now that is left to the Tribes Advisory Council, the Parliament and others. You see, in the Samata judgment also, if you see, the court has said that a uniform law for all over the country to extract minerals and look at these aspects have to be arrived at. But as you see in today's case of Arnab and the others, like all our Sudha Bharadwaj ji and Father Stan, they are all put behind, and Arnab, so the center is crying foul. So you understand what I'm trying to say here is that as this is tribal, and the reason I also reiterated my discussion with that old tribal leader where the Britishers are better because they treated everybody together. One as Indian. Therefore, here it's a partiality. When it comes to the tribal communities, the state is not really interested. And whoever is controlling the state knows that if the tribal communities get the autonomy, their business would not go on as it goes on today. So this is ultimately the issue. And the thing is still, even in the other states where actually Samata judgment has not been overturned, but the Balco judgment raised some objections on it. But that was also not like anything serious. So it is still open for litigation or still open for others in the other states to argue that no particular tribal land law can be so different from each other. There might be certain nuances, but the constitution scheme is that land in tribal areas or scheduled areas should belong to scheduled areas. and the resources also should be given to them for exploitation.
That's an interesting point you mentioned, sir. That was actually going to be my next question. Uh, technically, what the Samata judgment did also was that the only exceptions it made for these land transfers from tribals to non-tribals was in favor of either the state mine development corporation or any state instrumentality, or in favor of the tribal cooperative societies. And more often than not, these discussions we forget that even tribal cooperative societies are part of that conversation as well. Even as per the 1959 declaration, the only actual exception is tribal cooperative societies.
Yeah.
In your experience, have any such cooperative societies benefited from this judgment, sir? Have you seen that happen?
You see, for that to be, again, that's the government has to come out with its program, but the government has not. So actually, Samta judgment is not an anti-mining judgment. It only said that if you want to mine, then mine it this way. Let the local people also benefit from it, basically. So the state, if you really see, I mean, let's look at it this way. All the people who have escaped the country, all the non-performing assets and all these people, unless the state or the banks have given them money, they could not do dhanda, no? So similarly, if the state gives one lease to the tribal cooperative society, I am sure in today's situation, the tribal cooperative society will raise the money, because you give us a lease, then there are financiers who will come. See, माल हाथ में है तो पैसा मिलेगा. अब the point here is माल घर के नीचे, माने पैर के नीचे माल है. It is all the माल is below our feet, and the government keeps control of it. If they give a lease to any one tribal cooperative society, money can be raised, things can be done. It's a learning process. And if you have from 1950, since 47 till now, 70 years, if you have not given them, and we are saying they are poor and they are opposing everything, they will oppose, because you are wanting to loot. They understand today. So we have been trying, but the state is not willing. The same village which came in the movie clip, that Pandanna and others who talked about this thing, in their village, we have opposed the mine of the Birlas, then the later contractors, and we have said that unless local people get benefit, we will not allow anything, and the fight is still on. They have applied for a lease, the government has not given them anything. It gives others. So you see, that is the attitude. So ultimately, it is an attitude problem, it's an approach problem. And traditionally, tribal, non-tribal conflict is a very real conflict. And most of it is an uphill task that way.
Thank you so much for just talking about these aspects. I know you've spoken a lot, it's been an elaborate discussion, but I think what you mentioned was important, sir. This idea that more often than not with cases like Samata, the perception from the other side is always that, these cases are just anti-development, or these cases are, just they don't really make sense, not practical or whatever. And the question is, it's always these two binaries that it's stuck in. But I think this idea that the point of the judgment is for self-governance of the communities and community ownership of resources, and not just to say no to any form of development, but development that's inclusive, I think is important. And I think on that note, I'd ask Venkatesh sir to maybe just step in and give us his concluding thoughts on today's discussion, I think. So are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah. I have a question to ask.
Yeah.
ReachLawyer is very happy that ReachLawyer is associated with Mines, Minerals and People, which you're the chairperson for more than nearly 2 decades of its existence. But what I want to know is that you keep talking in respect of communities' control over the natural resources. You talk in terms of the kind of livelihood rights of the tribals, and you have been talking about it in Orissa. You have been trying to protect the rights in Niamgiri. You talk any of these areas, you including the kind of activity that happens in Jaisalmer or Rajasthan, or whether it is in against the mining companies, power companies in Uttarakhand and Himachal Pradesh. You have been associated with number of groups and organizations under our mines, minerals, and people. You have been making always a statement that two kind of statement which have been we have been witnessing in your number of programs. One just you were referring to in the course of your program, this program, that health of the hills is wealth of the plains is one of the slogan that have been able to make the connect to the urban population, to that of urban local population, to that of the tribal population at one level. And you're also talking in terms of across the places in the international conferences as well regarding communities' control over the natural resources. So when we say this judgment of Samata, we also look at what exactly is this nature. In fact, some people say that what exactly do you mean by communities' control over natural resources? People also ask this question that why should there be communities' control over natural resources? And while you were discussing regarding the construct of eminent domain, we saw that one of the main slogans of mines, minerals people has been the community's control over the natural resources. Why it becomes such a predominantly an issue vis-a-vis when the rights of the people are concerned? I just want you to just elucidate on that particular aspect with your relative experience.
Yeah, good question. See, it's like this. That's after the judgment, we actually started mines, minerals, and people because we realized that mining is going to be a big problem way back in '97. And like your question specifically on what is this community's control? Why? Now it is like this. For example, imagine you are living in a city. Yeah. First of all, the ethos is different. You see, the tribal people live off the land. For them, their land, their forest is it's a habitat. So you remove them from there and get them into a city, put them in a flat, they would be lost. Like you would be lost if you're taken from Bangalore and kept in one small tribal village without running water, without electricity, without a road, without a pakka building. You would feel out of place. So let me set this context first. So as the tribal communities live with the land, they're connected with the land and forests and the environment. And unfortunately, I guess, where the tribal people are, there is good forest, there is water, there is land, and below the land, there is minerals. All over the world, wherever tribal communities are, there are minerals below them. So the issue becomes very serious or very pertinent or important because you want the mineral, then you got to remove the existing land use pattern. So you got to remove the agriculture, you got to remove the topsoil, you got to remove the villages, and then go for the mineral. Except in certain underground coal mines or certain underground mines. But nowadays technology has changed, so they don't want any more underground mines. They just want to open up everything because it's easier to blast and take it away. So, and less number of workers too, because an underground mine needs a lot more workers and a lot more risk. So, therefore, the land use has to change. So, when the land use has to change, the people living on the land naturally will be affected. They are displaced, they are removed, they're thrown away, they are separated from the land and their relation. So therefore, our issue that communities control over resources. So it should be, if you like we said, if the road has to be laid by the Birlas, and if it is for public purpose, then let us discuss with the people and see how they want the road to be, how wide they want it to be, how they want it to go, whether through the valley or from above, so then options are available. But if you go there with a fixed thought and you want to put your plan there, then you got to uproot a lot of people. And today, this displacement issue has become so big in the last 50, 60 years that figures show that major number of people have been the tribal people who have been displaced either for dams, mines, or industries or highways. So therefore, this community's command over natural resources is very, very important. And we feel that if the community is in control, it's like, okay, let me equate it to you, like us, the urban people. If you're living in a particular colony or area, then the facilities, the amenities, the cleanliness, all this becomes our issue, right? You can't let the municipal corporation not pick up the trash. Otherwise, you can't walk on your road. It becomes stinky. So that way, as life, business, economics, anything is for community, anything is for society. So therefore, when we are talking of taking resource from a society that is like the tribal communities living in some place in the forest, then we got to consider their views and their these things. And so therefore, communities' control is important.
Under question which you have been prodding us has been that you have been also associated with larger international organizations and groups. You have been talking to the groups and activities, be it Indonesia, be it in Africa or in South America. You have been working with a great number of organizations across the globe and meeting them. And what exactly has been the kind of experiences that you have, your experience and vis-a-vis these kind of organizations? Because they are also, you have been referring to in your talks and other places, they're also facing similar kind of challenges. And that's something which is the case. There is a statement which is said that there are more number of people killed and displaced by mining than the war. So when you look from that construct, so I would like you to show some, give some information to our audience on the kind of experiences, the kind of picture which you talk in terms of the larger picture in respect of mining globally is also one of the important aspects you wanted to know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Your
Actually,
experiences,
yeah. See, the situation of indigenous people or tribal people all over the world is quite, it's not enviable. They are in the receiving end for many generations, and this particular push of the new economic policies or neoliberal policies is actually taking a toll even on the Brazilian Amazon. So that way, there is no particular area that has been left untouched. Even tribal communities in Russia and Alaska, of course, Alaskan tribal communities are slightly on a better footing because they have been able to negotiate since Richard Nixon's time with the U.S. government, and they have formed big corporations for on all these. So that way, they are a little ahead of all the rest of the indigenous populations. But people in Australia, people in Indonesia, Indonesia is nothing too different from India. That way, they are actually maybe worse because the stories we hear, even in the Philippines, for example, a lot of activists, environmental activists, and anti-mining activists have been killed by mining companies or hired goons or somebody. So that way. The pressure on people working with communities affected by these large industries is very heavy, very high, and the story is not too different. If at all, it is worse than our situation.
So immense thanks, Mr. Ravi. It has been a joy having you in our Friday talk show. In fact, we will be calling you again. In fact, the kind of wealth of information that you possess and also the kind of experience that you have and the kind of subjects that we are, the kind, for example, you have been working in Jharkhand have been working, in Orissa have been working in groups with in Chhattisgarh and across nearly around some 25 odd states across India have been associated with work. We have each state, each struggle. Also, one of these things, in fact, it will take so much of amount of time in the kind of stories that we have, as we have discussed today. One story, it took such amount of time only regarding the journey within a judgment in the small fragments. And if this fragment of information itself goes into such a talk show, the kind of experience that you share would be really more valuable. We'll be requesting you to join us again on this particular talk show. It's a joy hosting you today with our thing and being our guest. That we immensely thankful to you for your participation in our talk show. Today, we heard Mr. Ravi Pragada, a man who, as it was telling you in the beginning, quite self-effacing in the construct of his volume of his work is concerned, the amount of years of his struggle that he has put into. He is very, he would not like to push his work quantity, the amount of work that he has done. In fact, when you look at him, in fact, narrative which we have heard from him and had met him in, several times, that he virtually built his entire life around the struggle of the people. He virtually built his life. He made this a mission of his life to live. His marriage, his family, every aspect. And today his family is that very large family. In fact, if one were to go and meet him in his farmhouse in Dabanda, you would come across any given day number of tribals coming and asking him advice on anything and everything under the sun, whether it's being the education of a child or marriage of a daughter or funeral of a tribal. You will come across every aspect of life, and everyone would like to take an advice or assistance from Mr. Ravi Pragada. He has the entire tribal community out there in the tribal belt of Eastern Ghats has become his very large family. And today it was our pleasure that he accepted our invitation and he explained the kind of things. Though he would have, we would request him to discuss more on these issues, it will be a story for another day. So immense thanks for Mr. Ravi Pragada, and we will have your presence may be required again to discuss on other aspects of your work in Minds, Minerals and People on another day. Immense thanks. I leave it to the moderator to conclude. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I just like to thank both of you and especially Ravi. So I think I don't think we could have hoped for more exhaustive, discussion about what the movement looked like. Uh, a lot of us have read the judgment and we read about sporadic instances, but I think these discussions are important to see what that looked like at a personal level. What was at stake for you as a person when you were working with various organizations and communities on this aspect? And I think, like Sir said, it took this long for us to just talk about the journey to the judgment, but I'm sure you better than anyone else know that there's so much that's happened after. There are many more things to deal with post the Samata judgment. So hopefully, under that pretext, at least we'll get you back some other time, sir. But thank you so much for joining us today. I think with that, we'll wrap up today's discussion. Thank you, sir.
Thank you to all of you too. Thank you. It was a pleasure. Yeah. Okay.